Tom Clark's 6M podcast is a Boink Studios production. And now, on with the show. Hey, what is up? Welcome to Tom Clark's 6M podcast. I'm your host, Tom Clark, and in this episode, I'm joined by co-host Phil Lindsey. Good things come in threes. Anyone ever heard that before? It's one of those silly cliches I've heard probably all my life, man. Good things come in threes. I don't know if that's true or not because the same people who say that are probably those folks who go around saying that death comes in threes too. So maybe it's not such a good comparison. But no, listen, good things can come in threes too, I suppose. I don't know if anyone will agree with that statement as it pertains to today's topic, because once again, we're faced with a sequel to a film that I think a lot of people really wanted to love, but a lot of people didn't really love too much. And yes, we're talking about The Hangover again, part 3. I don't know. It's funny. Sometimes I think maybe they should have got cute with the title and called it Hungover or Hungover Again. It's like the Friday films. Friday, next Friday, Friday after next, 2 weeks from Friday, a week ago last Friday, a month from Friday. I don't know. They had like 20 sequels or something. It's crazy. So I don't know. They could have played with the title, but whatever. The Hangover Part 3 is what we're talking about. Phil, when you and I started this journey in the Hangover trilogy, we both praised the first film for its creativity, its original sort of story. We couldn't really poke holes in the plot. It was funny in all the quirkiest, weirdest, wonderful ways. We both really enjoyed it. Part 2, I think we both agreed, wow, you just went and made part 1 again. I don't know why, but okay, that's a choice, I guess. So as I recall, neither one of us were really sort of impressed by that. So now we're coming to part 3. Before I give you my take, I'm going to let you open this up because we're going in cold. I have no idea what you think about this film. True story, kids. So I can't wait to get your thoughts on it. What is your overall view of The Hangover Part 3, and how long has it been since you've seen it?
It's probably the best sequel to Hangover. I would I would wager it's probably the second best movie of the trilogy. Um, I think that they did a better job of doing clever callbacks this time, and some of the references didn't feel as cheap. Uh, I do think that they managed to wrap the trilogy up in a nice way. Uh, yeah, I think I enjoyed it a lot more this time around. I don't remember how I felt about it the first time I saw it.
Um, I am with you all the way. I was a third of the way through this film and thought, man, this is good. Like, and I don't know if it's because we had recently watched part 2 and reviewed it, but I'm with you. You didn't need part 2. Take away the few references you have in this to the second movie and explain, Stu's wife happened when we weren't looking. You didn't need part 2. We could live without it. This could have been part 2. It could have been a 2-part series. We could have been done with it. I mean, looking back on this film, do you even see any need for a part 2?
Uh, I think two worked for what it was. I don't think I don't think that that movie is nearly as creative as this movie was.
Hmm.
Um, I don't know. I if the plan was just to do a trilogy all along, then the second movie fit served its purpose.
I suppose I just belabor the second movie because it's just not good. It's for me, it's the exact it's just a pale carbon copy of the first one. They tried to exact the plot and it just missed the mark for me. I'm not a fan of part 2. I think part 3 works. They didn't do the same hungover formula. They teased it in the post credit scene or mid credit scene, which I thought was phenomenal, ridiculous, and everything it should have been. But they didn't repeat the first one, which was nice. There was a twist in this one that I don't know if I remember seeing the twist coming at all. Um, this is a Chow heavy film, Phil. How do we feel about Chow taking center stage in part three? He stole the show here, didn't he?
Um, he's not nearly as annoying as he was in the second movie. So
Right.
I was fine with it. I feel like some of the stuff they did with him wasn't as stupid or crass
Mm,
or, as we talked about, racist. He did have a moment where he did say something pretty racist in this movie as well.
that's right.
Um, but it wasn't nearly as bad as the second movie.
Yeah, Alan says the N word, and John Goodman says Chinaman a couple of different times. Um, but I'm sure we both seen and heard a lot worse. So yeah, there's moments. Um, I love Ken Jeong. I guess the point is if you're not going to duplicate the Hangover formula, which I'm glad they didn't, you need something to sort of stand out in front since there's no mystery this time. So why not just let Leslie Chow become the focal point? Once again, we lost White Doug, uh, kidnapped. You know, like here we go again. Poor Justin Bartha can't stay in a movie, one of these movies, very long. He's gone again. Uh, I mean, dude, I don't. I know to each his own. It's all subjective as anything else in entertainment, right? But I don't get a lot of the hate that's kind of been leveled against this from critics. I don't know if you know this, but on Rotten Tomatoes, it's bad, This film got a 20% aggregate rating. 20%.
Yeah.
Yikes. I had no idea. Less a comedy than an angrily dark action thriller, somebody said. Um, let's see. Generally unfavorable reviews. Yeah. Let's see. Ditching the hangover is the backward structure of the fleshed out characters. Any sense of debauchery or fun, this installment instead just thrusts its long suffering protagonist into a rote chase narrative. Yeah, critics were not kind here. It didn't do bad at the box office. It didn't do as spectacular as the first and second one did. The budget was 103 million. It made 362 million combined. It didn't quite exceed expectations like they were hoping for an opening weekend. Um, but Phil, could you chalk some of that up to this being the law of diminishing returns at some point?
Yeah, I absolutely think that's what this is. Yeah, I can understand uh how this started to feel like a chore to people because a lot of the excitement about Hangover, and we talked about it in the first one, is that it was lightning in a bottle. It didn't. This was not planned to be a blockbuster, and I feel like the further we got into this trilogy, the more they try to capture a blockbuster and make it feel like a blockbuster. And I do feel like the third movie felt more like a blockbuster movie than the other three. I mean, the other two, but I could definitely tell why people might not like this movie. I could tell why the humor might not hit with people. I don't think the humor is as good as the first movie, um, but I do think that it's not it's not bad. Maybe it's just me comparing it to the second movie because I don't think it's as bad as the second movie. Um, but yeah, I can see people feeling like, another one. Like, did we really need this?
Yeah, I agree. And dude, I'm sorry. I'm with you. I think this movie's fine. Not the funniest thing I've ever seen, but for me, this thing is head and shoulders above part two. I I, I mean, the a lot of the jokes in part two don't work. I just, I think we said during part two of the review, they just didn't stick the landing as they did in the first one with the jokes. Um, Alan is in his prime in this film, maybe more awkward and uncomfortable than maybe we've ever seen him. Let's dive into the cast before we really get into the meat of the story here. Let's begin with Alan because let's face it, Phil. We talk about Chow still in the show. This is still sort of Alan's franchise, I would say. Zach Galifianakis as Alan Garner. Um, it's funny because he's more cold this time, like cruel. The way he talks to Stu, his dad passes away, and I mean, oh man, I don't know, just something about the character. Did you pick up on that very early on? It's like he's not really slapstick funny anymore. He's just like mean spirited. What'd you think about the change in the character here?
I feel like this is really his movie. Like I know you said like there's a lot of Chow here, but I feel like this is really Alan's movie. I feel like this is really his journey, and really the entire movie is basically like Alan, you got to grow up. Everybody else in this friend group is married.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's the story of the last guy in the friend group that's married, that's still trying to get all the other guys like, hey, come hang out with me, come do weird wild stuff with me. And everybody else is like, no, we have responsibilities. Like you've got to grow up. And so I feel like that's really the theme of this movie.
That's a good call. Yeah. So if you've got a movie about three friends, or I guess four friends, and there's one guy not married, not happy, you got to get him married and get him happy by the end of the series. I'm okay with that. I mean, if you put it that way, it makes a lot of sense. Um, is so which Alan are all right? So which of the performances from Galifianakis, in terms of story, in terms of him as Alan, which of the three is the best Alan? Do you have a favorite in terms of which performance was better?
Um, I think that he's absolutely funniest in the first movie.
Mm.
I think he has funny moments in this movie, but I feel like he's allowed to do more with the character in this movie. Um, he does things that are very unintentionally funny in this movie, just like he did in the other two. Um, yeah, I don't know. I think again, I think if people are feeling like, this guy again, it's just kind of like, we've gone and we've done this same movie 3 times now, and it's like, how many times can you do this with the same group of guys and the same kooky guy at the middle of it. Um, and so I feel like there was definitely a directional choice to go, yeah, we've got to get him out of some of the more zany stuff that he does and get
Mm.
him into some more serious situations because um, we've done this 3 times at this point.
It is a twist, and it doesn't feel quite as zany. He feels more deeply rooted in the real world. I mean, forget the bit about the giraffe, but he seems a lot more rooted in reality. It's kind of like he's let the world turn him sour. And they make it clear from the beginning of the film that he's off his meds. And we come to find out later the timing of him being off his meds coincides with him hanging out with Leslie Chow. And I like at the end how they kind of wrap that up when he tells Chow, you know, you're bad influence for me. You're not good for me. It's like he realizes I got to get back on the meds. My life fell apart because I was hanging out with you. It's funny how they allowed him to have that epiphany when in the whole trilogy he's been a little nuts.
Yeah,
What about yeah,
I was just gonna say I do think it is a nice way to flip the franchise on its head. That
it
the
is.
first two movies, he's drugging people, and we don't know that in that time that he's also on meds. And this is the first movie where they're all sober.
Holy God, you're right. Yeah, there's no hangover at all until the very end. Yeah, for a film called The Hangover, there's no hangover till the very end. Even Chow is like, I mean,
Well,
forget well, the cocaine. So,
yeah, I mean, Chow is Chow throughout the movie, but I feel
yeah.
like that's very much the theme of this movie is that you can almost say that it's meta in the sense that The Hangover 3 is a hangover after the first two movies, in the sense that there is no sobering up period for any of these guys because all of them are like, no, we have responsibilities, we have life. And at the same time, um, Alan is going through like this hangover phase of having like these wild adventures with those guys and having to grow up without his dad and realizing Chow is not who he thought he was.
Hmm. A good, excellent call. Excellent call. This movie is a hangover in and of itself. There's that bit where they're in the car going back to Vegas, and he says, "Sue says I never thought I'd be here again," and Phil says, "It all ends tonight." That kind of felt like an inside reference to, yeah, we're not going to do these movies anymore. This is the last one.
Yeah,
Which,
yeah, it felt very thematic, and I mean everything about it of Phil not wanting to go back to Vegas and dreading it, and Alan is just like, oh, what's the problem? I want to go back to Vegas, and
yeah,
and,
it's great to
and
be back.
yeah. It's just still it's just like he's still in the same place he was in the first movie, and everybody else has moved on.
Yeah, and no one wants to think about the terrible things that happen. He's fine with it because, again, he's really not all there.
Yeah,
Something to think about. What about I was gonna ask you about this earlier. What about the scene when he's singing Ave Maria at the funeral service?
it's hilarious. I feel
Oh,
like there are a few scenes that they use to sell the movie, that aged very well. Like those clips of him on the expressway, and he's got like the thumbs up, still
yeah.
funny. Uh,
Oh my god. He's like, "I've got a giraffe. It's the best day of my life." And that kid's giving him the thumbs up in the car going next to him. Oh Lord. But they're at the graveside and he's singing, and Phil says, "You got the voice of an angel." And Stu says, "It's breathtaking." Like they're both straight face when they do this. It's so funny. And they never talk about it again. They never talk about how suddenly, Alan can sing and no one had any idea. It's funny. Um, we talked before about reviewing the first two, how they mimic the formula. There's a couple of things here that are mimicked. There's another Danzig song in this film. Mother's in this, but Stu doesn't sing this time. And what was something else that was mimicked in the first two? There's no Hangover, obviously. No one's been. Well, someone does get kidnapped. They did mimic that. Um, no monkey in this one. I mean, honestly, dude, they didn't really stick to the formula at all much, did they? They kind of just veered off on their own this time.
there's certain things that they brought back. I mean, there, and that's why I said some of the callbacks are a lot more subtle
Yeah.
and more clever. Uh, I mean, some of it, of course, it's not subtle at all, but it's more subtle than the second movie. Um, I mean, just the idea that I mean, them putting Chow in the trunk and
Yep.
taking him at the end is the callback to the first movie. Um, of course, everything in Vegas, them going back to Caesars. Um, I think, I mean, even the original scenario of them having to get Doug back, but having that twist on it is interesting. And I thought the way that they did all that stuff was a lot better setup than the second movie.
Hmm.
Um, I'm drawing a blank. There are other callbacks that I'm forgetting at the moment, but there are definitely other callbacks to the original movie, but they just don't use them the same way. They don't use them specifically as the same kind of plot device.
And you mentioned the trunk scene. I loved how that was kind of in slow motion. And they really made it out to be a big deal. It's like, well, he's going back in the trunk. Like we don't have a choice. So good.
Yep.
Um, so we mentioned the cast. Of course, we know the cores are back, the core central cast. Bradley Cooper is Phil, Ed Helms is Stu. Of course, Galifianakis is Alan. Ken Jeong, of course, is Leslie Chow. Jeffrey Tambor's back as Sid Garner, Alan's dad, who passes in this film. Mike Epps, also known as Black Doug, and don't say it to his face. He's not a fan of it. He's back. Justin Barth is back as Doug, of course. Um, let's see. Sasha Bareilles is back as Tracy. It's Alan's sister and Doug's wife. Jamie Chung is back as Stu's wife. Sandra Curry is the mom of Alan and Tracy. And Phil's wife, Jillian, is here again. Jillian Vigman portraying Stephanie Wernick. And well, we've got a couple of new cast members. First of all, we got Heather Graham back as Jade. It was a nice touch to see Jade back. And Phil, Jade turned out pretty darn normal, didn't she? Like no issues here at all.
Yeah. But that's what I'm saying. Everybody has moved on except Alan.
And grew up. Yeah.
I mean, even the kid.
Even the kid. Same
And
actor, by the way.
I think that's part of what snapped Alan out of it is him realizing like, no, the world is moving on around me, and I'm still like stuck trying to mimic the everything that was happening in the first movie.
Yeah, he very much so. Still stuck in the first two. But the new cast members who are along this time, Melissa McCarthy as Cassie, the pawnbroker who is infatuated with with Alan, I guess you could say. They have a thing. And John Goodman as Marshall, I am convinced, Phil, that John Goodman can play any role. I mean, he's so good. Remember the lovable, fat John Goodman on Roseanne that was just everybody loved him, and he's such a good guy. Man, he plays the heel very well. Like he just came off real in this movie, man. Talk about John Goodman as Marshall. And plus, also, Phil, a callback to the first film when Doug was saying Marshall's gonna kill me, right? He ain't gonna like this. Very nice callback to the first one.
Yeah, I thought that was great. Man, I like John Goodman a lot. He's been in so many things. Of course, like iconic for Roseanne and stuff, but I mean, he's had moments where he's played a bad guy before, and he's done it really good. I mean, he was fantastic in Fallen. Um,
Hmm.
every time I see him now, I think about him singing "Time Is on Our Side." Uh,
Yeah.
uh, and he was very creepy in the Cloverfield movie. He's fantastic in that. And so this is another instance where I feel like this gave him a chance to do something else. Um, and he's so good at doing like the subtle humor stuff and then also turning it up and being intense. Uh, man, I really enjoyed him.
Yeah, he's awesome in this. Very good. Um, Melissa McCarthy, I mean, she's so good, dude. And I'm gonna be honest with you, Melissa McCarthy, in not every role, but in a lot of her roles has fallen for me has fallen into that Kevin Hart trap, that Adam Sandler trap, where they tend to play like the same character in every film. Like she's a little dim-witted, but she's over the top, but she's kind of likable. She's got a good heart. And it's kind of the same thing I see other actors falling into. But I don't really have a lot of complaints about her at all. I just there's moments when I wish that, kind of like the Kevin Hart thing, dude. I'm a Kevin Hart fan. I love his stand-up before he got really big and everything. But dude, it's like the same role every time. And I guess you do what works. I would love to see it's off topic. I'd love to see Kevin Hart as the straight man and be the action star and not be a punchline for a change. To me, that would be awesome, but that's a different topic. What'd you think about Melissa McCarthy in this film as Cassie?
Uh, yeah, I definitely know what you're talking about. I feel like there are a lot of comedians that they start getting typecast as the role that they did well, and everybody wants them to do the same thing but turn it up like to another notch.
Yeah.
Like Will Ferrell was doing it for a while, where
Mm. Yep.
people wanted him to keep coming back and doing a more and more outlandish character, and I definitely feel like she fell in a rut. Like, and I don't want to say a rut because it was successful for her. So like right around the time of Bridesmaids, like I feel like afterwards she really blew up and she was getting a lot of leading woman roles, and some of those roles were just like, yeah, this isn't that funny. Um, but I thought that she was good here. I thought she was good here because she wasn't doing any of the stuff we see her do in some of her other movies. She
Mhm.
wasn't playing it up as much, and we don't see a whole lot of her in this movie, so maybe that's part of it.
Good call. And she's more, I mean, next to Galifianakis as Alan, you have to be the straight man. So she was kind of the normal one next to him, if there is such a thing. Um, yeah, that was different. And by the end of the film, they're getting married. He's got that top hat. It's utterly ridiculous. Um, we're like, what do you think about the hat? So I keep the hat because I mean, why wouldn't Alan keep the hat? I mean, it's you have to. It's him. Um, what about the bit when he comes back in there and they kiss and he just puts his pants down and
Yeah,
he's like, "This is how I saw they did it when I watched a pornography." I think is what he called it.
yeah.
She's like, "I think you can pull your pants up." Oh my god, they're so awkward together. It's ridiculous. In terms of poking holes in a script, um, can you poke holes in this one? I mean, if you looked hard enough, I guess you could. I could poke all kinds of holes in the second one. The first one, not really. The first one seemed fairly plausible, all things considered. Part three, I don't know. What's your take? What's your take on this? Can you poke holes in the plot of part three at all?
Um, they travel around very quick. That's one
Mm.
of the big ones in this one, which it doesn't bother me. Um, One of the twists in this movie, I was just like, once you think about it for a while, it's like, well, wait a minute, cause we get the twist with Chow, right?
Hmm.
Chow tricked them into stealing the rest of the gold out of Marshall's basement, and they find out like, no, they didn't steal the gold back to give it back to Marshall. They stole the rest of Marshall's gold. Um, which is a great twist. It's a great,
Yes.
it's hilarious, and all those other things. But when I really thought about it, I was like, wait a minute. Marshall is supposedly this big drug dealer, and that's all the security he had in his house. He didn't have anybody. He just had like a security system, like a regular person, and some dogs. He didn't have any like gunmen. He didn't have any like cars watching it.
Yeah.
He didn't have like a big like. He didn't have any like. I know that they disabled the gate to get in, but it still seemed like they got in there pretty easy for a guy that is like supposedly like this huge like drug dealer.
And they had, well, they did have cameras that the guys, I guess it was a paint gun they shot at the cameras.
Yeah.
Yeah, I see where you're coming from. But you could also say, Phil, that no one in that city would touch him. No one would be foolish enough to go up to his house and cause trouble because the cops know who he is. Everyone knows who he is. I guess if you want to get technical, you could explain it that way.
Yeah.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, I don't know, dude. I even love the poster to this. Actually, I love the poster to this. It's the three of them in suits. Galifianakis got dark glasses on. Um, I mean, I enjoyed it. There was things about the promotion of this I really liked, and the only caption on the poster was "the end" is all it said. And the joke that was going around, and it still holds true, is that they all agreed to do a part three with the understanding there would not be a part four. But I don't know if you checked out any behind the scenes to this film. They're all having a blast. They had such great chemistry. They could riff off each other and pitch ideas as they were filming, and everything worked, everything clicked. They all loved being there together. So I don't think it was because, oh, I'm sick of doing these films. I think they were all just ready to move on. I mean, does that make sense? I mean,
Yeah.
kind of like everyone's trying to move on, but Alan has it. Now the whole cast is ready to move on to the next project.
Yeah. I feel like that. Yeah. I feel like it was time to move on from the franchise. Uh, there wasn't really anything more they could do with it.
Hmm, good call. No story left to tell, right?
No.
Um, well, they are back to the wolf pack, kids. The term that Alan used. He was a one man wolf pack in part one. What about I gotta ask you this, the sort of the we talked about Alan kind of being mean spirited, especially towards Stu, because he has such he has such a fascination with Phil, and that continues. But like, man, he is not a fan of Stu. They all seemed okay with each other in the end, but like, is it almost like Alan needs a character like in part two? It was the brother that he did not like at all. So it's almost like there has to be someone that he's at odds with in every film here.
I don't think it's that he doesn't like Stu. I think that him and Phil's relationship is different because Phil accepts him, regardless if he thinks some of the stuff he does is ridiculous. He still accepts him for who he is. Phil
Mhm.
is the only guy at the beginning of the movie, by the way, that tells everybody really needs. He was like, no, just get him a girlfriend and get him married off. Everybody else is trying to like medicate him and stick him in like uh, where are they trying to send him to, a rehab or something? Um, and
Yeah, yeah.
And Phil is the only one that's just like, no, let's just get him a girlfriend and give him a reason to not be so enamored with us.
Yeah, he's lonely. That's all. That's all that's wrong with him.
He's the only one that kind of looked at it in a normal way. And I feel like for everything that they had gone through, Stu still looked at him as a nuisance. And I feel like that's what bothered um Alan. I feel like Alan was having moments in the movie like, why does it feel like I'm still having to drag you along on the adventure? And Phil is just like, okay, well, we're in this, so let's just handle it.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah.
and in the meantime, Stu is Stu, and he's been doing this for 3 movies, complaining about everything every step of the way. And so I feel like there's a moment in this movie where Alan is just like, okay, like the moment where they're out in the desert, and he's just like, and he talks to him, and he tells him basically, "I'll be in the car," because basically like, look, we're in this, we got to handle it, we got to deal with it.
Dude, did what movie did that come from? Because I swear to you, I remember hearing that like they took that whole riff from another film. Am I crazy? Does that sound familiar to you at all?
They probably did, but I am missing it at the moment.
Yeah,
They probably did.
yeah. To me, it does sound like that they took it from something because it just it just felt like it didn't quite belong. That it was meant to be somewhere else. Tom Clark's 6M podcast is sponsored in part by Radius Law Group. Every day, Radius helps individuals, families, small businesses, and nonprofit organizations throughout North Carolina, Florida, and Pennsylvania resolve their legal issues by providing effective legal counsel in the areas of estate planning, as well as elder law and Medicaid. Radius Law holds the radical belief that working with a lawyer can indeed be enjoyable. So give them a call at 1-800-519-5667 for more information and tell them that Tom Clark's 6M podcast sent you. Yeah, I'm with you. I just there's so much of this movie that just worked for me personally. And again, I'd go back to the thing with Phil where Alan's got this fascination with Phil, but Phil tells him more than one time, "I love you, man." And when they talk about they're going to take him to Arizona to this clinic, and he starts that crying,
Yeah.
dude, and it goes on forever. And he looks at Phil, and then when Stu puts his hand on his back, he turns to Stu as if he's in pain. Because he just doesn't. He gives Stu such a hard time in this film, but like he looks back to Doug or to Phil, and he's just so much more emotional toward Phil. It's just so much fun. And dude, when they go in for that intervention, and his mom uh introduces Alan's friend, I'm like, Alan has a friend? Are you kidding me right now?
Yeah, I'm telling you, I think that most of the dynamic, and I mean, really, if you look at it from Alan's point of view, Alan is probably looking at it like, no, you've benefited from our adventures more than anybody, but you are the only one that act like you don't want anything to do with me.
Right.
If it wasn't for me and we didn't go off and do that, you would have still been with that horrible girlfriend from the first movie.
Ooh.
Um,
Dude, good call. I never thought about it that way.
I mean, even if you look at the stuff in Bangkok, man, if they don't go on that adventure and everything, he doesn't have the courage to stand up to his stepfather. I mean, it's his father-in-law. You're the only one in this situation that's acting like you don't want to be here, but every step of the way, you've benefited.
And really, there's not really a lesson left for Stu to learn in this movie, is there? He's kind of okay now.
Exactly. And I think maybe that's part of the meta reason of he's like, I don't want to be here. But at the same time, I also feel like he spends so much time in this movie complaining about the situation or complaining about Alan when Phil, even despite certain things that he's annoyed with, still sees Alan as a friend.
Right. Yeah, dude. Good call. Like, and really, Alan's like you said, Alan's the only one that hasn't changed. He's the only one left. I mean, when you look at it that way, this movie makes so much more sense, for sure. But again, dude, I didn't hate this movie. I don't get, again, it's subjective and all that stuff, I suppose. But that scene where they're going to take him into for treatment at this clinic, they introduce Nico, his friend, and he's like, "What's up, bros?" And do you kind of get the feeling Nico might be his drug dealer?
Yeah. I mean, the funny thing, hey, I could throw a weird analogy in here. The funny thing in all of this is I feel like the four of them are kind of like the main four from Wizard of Oz.
Ooh,
I was because Stu is the cowardly lion. He has to learn for 2 movies. Like, no, you're more brave than you think. Just stop curling up every time something happens and stop complaining so much.
there's an analogy I never would have made before. That's not bad. Um, so if all right, so if they're so Stu would be the Scarecrow, right? Or no, Cowardly Lion, I guess. Yeah,
Yep, it's Cowardly Lion. Uh,
you could argue that Phil is Tin Man because he kind of comes off at times like he doesn't.
like he doesn't care about
He doesn't.
anything.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
He's the too cool for school guy.
yeah.
Uh,
That
you
would
could.
leave.
This is a hilarious comparison, but
Yeah.
you could make the case that Alan is definitely the Scarecrow
Hmm.
because, for mental reasons, he's kind of the dunce of the group,
Yeah.
and Doug is Dorothy because Doug kind of gets dragged into this like fantastical world where he's like the only normal one there.
He is the only normal one there. I don't think Doug ever has a moment. Does he? I don't think there's ever a moment with Doug at all.
Yeah, and the entire time is trying to get Doug back, trying to get Dorothy back to Kansas.
Mm. Never would have made that comparison, but that's not bad. I like that a lot. Um, I was going to ask you in terms of your circle of friends, because you probably see guys in this cast that you recognize in terms of your circle of friends. There's the good looking guy who's kind of aloof. He's your boy, but he can he can probably have any woman he wants because he's just that guy. And then there's, Doug, who's basically a good guy, family man, kind of quiet, reserved. You got Stu, who's uptight, can be bullied around. He's submissive. You got Alan, who's a little crazy. Who are you in this group of friends, man? I'll put you on the spot. Which character are you in this group of friends? Who do you identify with?
Yeah, I don't know, because I could see aspects of all four of them. Um, there are parts of me where I can be very antisocial, and I can be very much like, once I'm ready to bounce, and I'm like, this doesn't look like my scene, I'm out. Um, like that. I definitely could see that part of Stu, where I'm just like, sometimes I'm like, nah, this ain't me. Uh, but at other times, like I'm a go with the flow guy, and I could see that, the Phil side of that. And there's other times where I've definitely been with friend groups where I'm just observing from afar, and I'm like, all right, well, that's their deal. Like, so I can see the Doug part where I'm just like, I'll go out with people and I'm just like observing, like, cool. Uh,
Yeah, I don't know where I fall on this one. I guess if I was playing it safe, I would say I'm Doug because I'm sort of. I mean, you've hung out with me a little bit. I mean, I'm talkative and whatnot, but I'm not nuts. I don't do anything really crazy. Um, I'm definitely not Alan, I don't think. Although I will say, a lot of the time when I'm hanging out with friends, I tend to be the comic relief. And I kind of put myself in that position. Like if we hang out with someone and one of us is just really on his game and is getting all the laughs, I tend to sit back a little bit and let that person just get the laughs. And I'm like, I'm going to relax a little bit. But if there's no one there, I feel like I'm the guy that has to get the one liners. I don't know what that is, but that kind of feels like my role anytime I'm hanging out with somebody. It's very odd. Do you know Alan? There's the bigger question, Phil. Do you know an Alan? Are you friends with an Alan, and are you staying away from him?
I think everybody has a friend that it's like they're kind of on the same stuff that they've been on for years and they haven't really grown up. I think we all have a friend like that. Uh, I know more than one person like that.
Wow.
um, And no, man, I don't ever look at them like, oh, that's not my friend. It's just you always have that kind of person. And you're like, all right, I know how they can be. I'll let them have their moment.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. I mean, I don't hang out much anymore. When you get to be married and with a kid and everything, you tend to not have a life. No regrets, no complaints. I'm just saying things change. But Yeah, I mean, I was kind of identifying here with different characters in different moments through the course of this film for sure. Um, as we said, Chow, the focus a lot of this movie's on Chow, but man, the opening scene of this film, Phil, is glorious. That prison in Bangkok, it's epic. And you know that the entire prison is in a riot as a cover for Chow's escape. And we never get told how he did it, who he provoked, but you know, as sure as the audience does, that Chow's behind the whole thing. And then come to find out he's tunneled his way through the wall and out of the prison. I mean, what a way to open this film, dude. It was awesome.
Yeah, it's so over the top. The security guard yelling into that whole child is just so ridiculous. Uh, but it works. It works for what it is. I know it's kind of like a Shawshank Redemption
Yeah,
um reference, but it works.
it absolutely works. I loved it so much. That whole thing. Oh, and just the fact that Chow's this international criminal, this mastermind, and he keeps finding a way to escape. And of all the people he could have bumped into and ended up being friends with, it's Alan of all people. And Alan really genuinely likes Chow. He loves hanging out with him. It's what an odd pairing this is, man. Talk about, the odd couple or whatever. But um, does the character of Chow take away from this film? Is it too distracting for you at any moment, or do you think it's just right?
He works a lot better in this movie as a catalyst for things than he did in the second movie. Um, there are issues I have with him in his character. I mean, in this movie, but he's just not as annoying as he was in the first movie uh,
Mm,
or his second movie. This I don't know. But this goes back to what I was saying about Stu. Like, really, everybody else has embraced Alan, but Stu. He's the only one. I feel like
yeah.
Doug has to because he's related to him through marriage now. But he even snaps kind of at Doug at one point.
Yes, he does actually.
He snaps back at Doug. But I feel like that all the times we see him do that is when people are just kind of ostracizing him.
Mhm. Yeah, good call. So, a few trivia facts about this film. We've already mentioned that the cast agreed to do the third film as long as there wasn't a fourth movie. And some of the background of that, Phil, is that Bradley Cooper, Ed Helms, and Galifianakis all felt the story had lost its momentum. Good call, I believe. Cooper took convincing to do the project from Galifianakis, is what word is. So that makes sense as well. This is the fun bit. All three guys, and Justin Barth is not included in this, Phil. You left Doug out. I don't know what's going on here. They were all reportedly paid $15 million plus a back end deal to return for this movie. Not a bad payday, if you ask me.
Wow.
Um, as we said, the kid is back. Still Carlos, the baby they called Carlos in the first movie. Grant Holmquist is back reprising his role, little baby Carlos here. Um, yeah, it's let's see what else. In 2012, Galifianakis lost so much weight he had to wear a prosthetic belly for this film. So he was no
Okay.
longer, they called him fat a couple of different times in this film, but he really wasn't. Could you tell that he had lost weight from part 2 to part 3?
Yeah, I could tell some differences in his face, but I did not know he was wearing a prosthetic.
Yeah. Um the cast all say the first film was their favorite. Oh, we're with you there. Let's see. Near the end of the movie, when the wolf pack is returning to the minivan, there is a billboard with Eddie, the man who ran the wedding chapel in The Hangover, in the background. I totally missed that.
Yeah, no, I thought the way that they ended the movie, a lot of the final sequences were really cool. The shot of them all walking across the street at the same time, which is of course the Abbey Road reference.
Yes.
Um, I thought that was great. I thought the montage of them walking down hallways together when they were walking them in there to get married is also great.
Yeah, I picked up on the Abbey Road thing. That was pretty nice. Um, Yeah, and the minivan and everything, and then of course they end up back at the minivan's back at the pawn shop or whatnot, and it's yeah, that's pretty cool. Nice touch. It made a lot of sense to end this movie in Vegas, didn't it? Kind of bring it full circle.
Yeah, yeah, it
Yeah,
definitely was a full circle moment, and I definitely felt like the way they wrapped up everything in Vegas made sense.
yeah, I agree with that. Um, their journey to Mexico is interesting. The fact that Chow convinced them it was his house, and honestly, I don't think I didn't know he was conning them at all. I had no idea. Um, so
Yeah,
yeah, that was
I
cool.
like a lot of stuff with Chow, where like when they're trying to drug him and he's sitting there sniffing the drink, and then he just all of a sudden flips out and he's just like, "Why are you trying to drug poor Chow?"
Yeah. There's always a comment about something Chow, you know. I see the billboard now. Yeah, it's way up. Yeah, I see it now. So good. It's I see Eddie, but I can't make out what it says. That's very cool.
You
They put
shot
that
at
little
him.
Easter egg in there. I totally did not catch that the first or a couple the first two times around at all.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, I really thought I liked the way they brought Black Doug back in.
yeah.
Um, I thought that that was a clever way to call back to the first movie and introduce the Marshall character. Um, yeah, then he meets his unfortunate demise.
Oh my God. Yeah, we didn't even mention Omar Epps back as Black Doug. That was kind of cool. He's not as much of a crack up in this one as he was in the first time we saw him in the first one. He's not quite as funny because he wasn't supposed to be. But man, John Goodman made quick work of him, didn't he?
Yeah, uh, I wasn't expecting that when he immediately goes, "Someone has to die," and then shoots him on sight. Uh, then he gives the very dry line afterwards, like, "Yeah, I'm killing ducks today."
Yeah. Jeez. um, there is a trend they continued. The infamous giraffe scene, which by the way, they had a real giraffe on set. They didn't really kill him, which is nice.
Yeah,
PETA,
I'd
you know,
assume so.
PETA gets involved. Phil, they frown on that sort of thing, murdering of animals. Uh,
Uh, did you catch Chow throwing a shot at Peter?
I did, yes. Yes, because of the whole monkey debacle from part 2.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was pretty good because they were all convinced Peter was convinced that the monkey was chain smoking cigarettes. He's like, "The monkey's not actually smoking. Everyone relax." So, that was good. But yeah, there's been a wild animal in all 3 films. The tiger in the first, the monkey in the second one, the giraffe in the third one. Yeah, pretty good.
Yeah, I thought everything about that was hilarious. Alan just thinking that you can just transport a giraffe home that way is just incredibly ridiculous. And the argument he gets in with his dad when he gets home, and he's just like, "What? It's majestic. It's pensive.
Yeah. Where'd you
He,
hear
he's
that word
just
pensive?
where'd you learn that word?" Or him his dad having a heart attack, and he just like throws on his headphones, and he's not paying attention to any of it in the background.
Oh my god. Yeah, it's having a heart attack. So good. Um, yeah, that's yeah. So many parts of this movie. Again, I was so much more. I was just so much happier with this film than I was the second one. And again, critics crapped on this film. It made some money, but it didn't like blow the world up or anything. But it's like, yeah, I don't know. In every film of the trilogy, including this one, there are pigs. Um, let's see. There was an inflatable pig in the bubble bath in the first one. In part two, during the car chase, of course, Mr. Chow crashed into a pig hanging on a meat stand. And in this one, Marshall's thugs wore pig masks. So that's
Yep.
nice. Did you miss Iron Mike in this film?
Okay, I miss him in here.
Yeah. No, no, not did you miss him? Did you miss him not being here?
Oh no, I didn't feel like that was I didn't feel like that was a big loss here. I did wonder for a brief second when the limousine came and picked them up and they were trying to figure out who bailed them out. I was like, is it going to be Mike?
Ooh, that would have been awesome. Now I want that to have happened. That would have been great. Yeah, I kind of wonder why they didn't involve him in some kind of way, or at least he would have been at Alan's wedding singing in the ceremony after the fact, like he did in the second movie. I don't know, but that'd have been cool. Um, let's see. Series trademark. Billy Joel was seen on Cassie's shirt while the introduction to his song "The Stranger" played in the background. The song Alexa is played in the second film.
Yeah, there's a Kanye West song played every movie as well.
That's true. Forgot about that. Yeah, and you're right about the Shawshank Redemption connection for sure. The wrestling match, something you and
That's
I know a
right.
little bit about. Yep.
CM Punk versus John Cena.
Yep. From February 25th, 2013, from Raw, the winner, of course, Cena, faced The Rock at that year's WrestleMania in New York City. The logo for WrestleMania can be seen in the background.
Yep, it's the logo for WrestleMania in New York.
Yep. Let's see. Each movie of the trilogy, as we said, the Kanye West song for sure. Um, Ken Jeong and John Goodman appeared in the Transformers films together. I honestly didn't know because I'm not a fan of that franchise. All right.
Yeah, it's not very good. The first one's
Nah.
good, but it gets progressively worse and worse.
Oh, I want to do a 6M on the animated film, which is still a classic to me. But yeah, I have no interest in talking about the live action. We see the director Todd Phillips is back again. They only refer to him as Mr. Creepy, and he's in a motel room in a bathrobe, paying off a prostitute as Mr. Chow. Talk to me about this parachuting scene with Chow going across Vegas. They actually had these guys jumping out of planes at night. None of this was CG'd, and a lot of these guys were like Ken Jeong's size, height, and everything. And this was real. None of this was CG. The casinos cooperated and gave them control of the fountains in front of the Bellagio, which like never happens. What a cool scene. Dangerous, right? At night with these skydivers. But man, what a cool scene this was.
Yeah, I think the entire Caesar's Palace thing was pretty good. Just them breaking in and just like the strobe light effect, and you can't see anybody in there, and like you're just seeing glimpses of people. I thought the way that was shot was really cool. And yeah, I think the Chow parachuting was about as good as you're going to get out of it. It's a funny gag for a minute, and then it kind of plays out too long because then he's like singing and doing all this other stuff. Like he's singing, "I Believe I Can Fly" at one point, and it's like, okay, let's let's move on to the next thing now.
Oh, and he yells out, "I love cocaine," which is
Yeah,
effing crazy. The F word, by the way, kids, 285 times in this film. That's
sounds
a
about
lot.
right.
That's a lot. Oh, wait, whoa. My apologies. That's in the entire trilogy. 285 times. But still, it would have made sense in this one as well, because I heard it a lot. I think it was Stu's go-to line, wasn't it?
Yeah, several times throughout this movie or out the franchise. That's his reaction to things.
Yes. Kind of became his catchphrase. This movie is the only entry in the series in which the characters die. Both Black, Doug, and Marshall are both shot and killed. It's the only one. I guess that's right, because you thought maybe Mr. Chow was dead, but he wasn't. Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah, 3 characters die because Alan's dad also died.
Oh, that's right. Good call. Good call. There you go. And the giraffe, Phil. Don't forget about the giraffe.
Yeah, the giraffe.
Giraffe didn't get a name, unfortunately. Yeah. I mean, dude, again, I to each his own. You can love or hate whatever you want to love or hate. And again, I guess for me, after having just watched the second one, watching this one afterward, it's like, yeah, I don't see what the problem here is because I was just not a fan of part two. But part three just makes so much sense to me in terms of being a better film than the sequel.
Oh yeah, it is vastly superior sequel. I feel like the way they wrapped up Alan's story of him essentially by the end of this movie, um, by being in his dad's shoes and being in the fort with Carlos and really understanding from his dad's point of view, like his dad really just wanted the best for him, and him having that moment where he's like, "No, my dad was my best friend," and he was like, "I really let him down." Um, and him having that moment of like, yeah, I think I have to grow up, and he does things that here that are not just Alan being zany and goofy. He does pretty heroic things. I mean, to be honest, um, it would have been very easy after the way Chow treated him and the others, locking them in the basement, uh, and leaving them to die basically, uh, when they helped him get the gold. It would have been very easy for him to be like, "Nope, I'm just gonna leave Chow in the trunk and let him get killed." But he didn't.
Yeah, good call. Yeah. Yeah, he helped him in the end, and if he had not, they would have killed him. But then Chow jumps out and kills two people in front of him.
Well, I mean, he didn't really have a choice. Marshall was gonna kill him if he didn't. Uh,
Well, that's a good call, I guess.
but I thought I thought the entirety of him. Um, it's so funny that out of all of the people, and that's why I say him and Phil's relationship is so different because Phil's the only one that pretty much accepts him from the beginning,
Mhm.
and so when Chow goes to shoot Phil, he's like, "No, you got to go through me."
Yeah, wow. Crazy. Yeah. I mean, can we say that Alan finally grew up by the end of this film, or would you say that about this character as zany as he is, as messed up as he is?
I mean, I feel like he did it in several ways. He made the hard decision of breaking off his friendship with Chow. And I mean, he even addressed it literally when Stu was like, "Do you have a way to get home?" And he's like, "I'm a grown man."
He said, "I'm a grown man. I'll ask a stranger."
Exactly.
So he's not gonna let go altogether, right? He's
Uh,
still gonna there's gonna be enough of Alan there to love and to be a little nuts, but yeah, for the
yeah,
most part, he's having to grow up.
he essentially grows up by the end of this movie. He has to make adult decisions by the end of this movie. We find out how old he is in this movie, which I didn't know he was that old. Uh, he said 43, right?
I think that's right. Yeah.
And he has he has several moments here where he does do things that are, you know,
42. 42.
42.
Yeah.
Uh, but yeah, he does do several things in this movie that are either admirable or it does have a moment of it that is redeemable. Like, I mean, even all of the stuff with him and Carlos and him, um, you can read this several ways. You can say that in that scene he lied because uh he just lied because it's just an Allen thing to do and lie, say he's real dad. But um, another way to look at it is that he didn't have a real answer for him. It wasn't like he could say no and have this boy continue to spend the rest of his life hoping to meet this dad that he might not ever meet.
True.
And he essentially gave him something. He gave him consolation in that moment, like, "Yeah, I'm your dad."
Yeah,
And
no
it
kidding.
And even him leaving the glasses with him and having the kid accept him by the end of it, I just feel like that was a big part of him growing up in this movie.
Yeah. I mean, you're making this into a much more heartwarming flick than I would have thought it would be. I did like, which is fine, by the way. I did enjoy the final scene where they're walking down the hallway for him to get married, and they flash back to when they were walking together in the first two films. That was pretty cool.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I like the way that they tied that in. Um and it makes the most sense that he's the last guy to get married. And you give him a marriage, but you don't make it unrealistic. It's still an outlandish situation. It's still the exact type of person that he would marry. It's not like he ended up with like this model or something, and it's like this totally unrealistic situation.
Well, Well, all right. So as we wrap this up, let me ask you this: uh, Did they wrap everything up? Right. Was there anything that did they leave anything hanging for you? Did it make sense the way it ended? Are you okay with this just being a trilogy? Do you care anything at all about ever seeing these characters back in any shape, form, or fashion? It just leave it here. What's your thoughts on that?
I think that I think that they left it perfectly. Um, I think that it is interesting that out of all of them, because Phil is the only one that's married in the first movie.
Hmm.
So there's no chance to go on a bachelor party or go on a getaway with him. And
Ooh.
so the other two, they went on bachelor. They had like essentially a bachelor party for them, and that's what led to the Hangover stuff. And I think again to show that Alan had grown up, he didn't want to do that this time. They cut just to them getting married. They don't
Yeah.
have any bachelor party.
True.
At least they don't say that they do.
Then you come to find out that Chow sent the cake.
Yeah, and I think that him not associating with Chow anymore, he had to. Like there was no way that he could move on and have a normal life if he's still associated with Chow. Chow was
Yeah.
always gonna keep coming back and using him or doing something ridiculous.
Yeah. Totally. I know that the mid-credit scene was nothing. It was just to leave the fans with something ridiculous and crazy and insane. And there's no sense in having a part four. But a lot of times we see something like that. We're like, well, they left the door open, but knowing what we know, there's not a part four. So everybody out there, relax. If you didn't like this movie, don't sweat it. You don't have to worry about another one.
Did I miss
Uh,
the mid credit sequence?
what's that?
Did I miss the mid credit scene?
Did you miss the mid-credit sequence? I think you might have. You have to go watch that. I can't believe you missed it. They wake up. I'm not going to ruin it for you, but they wake up after they got married. And Stu comes out of the next room and something insane has happened to Stu again because they're like, what happened? And Doug goes, Chow sent the cake.
Oh yeah.
Or they ask Alan. Alan says, Chow sent the cake. So apparently the cake was drugged. Of course it was. And there's Doug's nowhere to be found, by the way. I'm not going to give it away what happened, but you'll have to go watch that. It's insane.
Oh yeah. I remember it now.
Yeah. I'll be honest with you. I don't know if I remembered that from the first time I saw this film because it happened so far in that I don't think I knew it was there. This was, 2013, this film. We're 5 years into the Marvel MCU run, but I don't think anybody expected a comedy like this to have that moment. We didn't get the picture ending through the credits that we got in the first two because there was no need for it this time. Did you miss that at all? Would it have been cool to see like behind the scenes pics of the cast and stuff? That would have been kind of nice.
I hear I'm gonna throw again. They went meta on you. The flashbacks of them all walking down hallways and stuff together from the first two movies is essentially the pictures of this movie.
Mm, I'll take that. Yeah, I get it. I guess I was kind of hoping for more of a Lethal Weapon 3 ending where they're all,
Why can't we be
yes,
friends?
that terrible song. God, don't start me on that song. That song I'm sure was great when it was first released, but now that it's been used a million times in a million different movies and TV shows, I can't do it anymore. Yeah, I was wanting the Lethal Weapon ending. Call me sentimental, but that's what I was hoping for. Well, kids, guess what? There's the Hangover 3. You either love it, you hate it, or you're indifferent to it. So I don't know. Up to you where you fall. Again, I will tell you, I enjoyed this film. I don't see a whole lot wrong with it. It's goofy, it's zany, it's nuts. It is what it is. I much prefer it. I don't even need to see the second one again if I'm being straight. I just wasn't a big fan of the second one. I think I made that clear. It's not the first one now, folks. That compares to the first one, how original it was, how great it was. But this is good, I think. So, Phil, as we wrap up this trilogy, let's hear your last word on the Hangover 3.
Uh, I think it was a nice way to wrap up the trilogy. I think it was about the best way we were possibly gonna wrap things up. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it for what it was.
Yeah, same here. Same here. I don't have a whole lot to complain about with this film. I think it was just fine. Again, everybody can have their own opinions, and I totally get that. And yours don't have to match ours. I totally understand and respect that. But it is what it is. Again, I enjoyed this flick. I wouldn't mind seeing it again, to be honest with you. But there you go, kids. That's all for us. Again, don't expect a part 4. You're going to be sorely disappointed. But as always, you can expect great things from this cast because, again, this cast is top notch. And we'll see what they all get into next. But in the meantime, that is The Hangover Part 3. Hey, thanks for listening to the show. Check out our social media on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at 6M Podcast. We'll see you next time.